Hello, welcome back to the Rails Quest channel. Today I'm going to talk briefly, just give an overview of how you might want to use delegated types when you're integrating different types of LLM APIs with your application. This is a content generation platform that I created a while back, and I recently learned about the LLM provider OpenRouter, which allows you to access not only OpenAI's ChatGPT, but it also allows you to access any of a number of other open source models and Claude, all using the same API. So it's a really neat platform. My platform was built originally with just ChatGPT. So I decided to try my hand at refactoring the application to use the delegated types feature of Rails so that I could have both ChatGPT configs and OpenRouter configs exist in the same application. So you can see here, this is a content type, kind of a template for generating content. And it has all these different options, but the option we're looking at right now is the model, which is OpenRouter. And you can see I haven't populated the list with everything it supports, but there's just a little demo list of a few things you can pick. And notice you can pick from OpenAI and from Anthropic models. If I go back to my list of content types, this one has a little bit more detail. It's a more mature integration. You can set temperature, max tokens, all that stuff. It's very easy to do, very portable. In fact, OpenRouter supports the same API, but I wanted to leave the first class support of OpenAI in this application, and I didn't want to depend too much on those APIs staying the same. So I decided to add OpenRouter as a totally new thing. These are the kinds of design decisions that you have to make for yourself when you're building your own application. So let's look at the code very briefly. Here is a case statement. This is one pattern you might want to use when you're using delegated types. The AI config has an adaptable. This could be one of an OpenRouter config or a ChatGPT config. And you see that we render the OpenRouter attribute, which just looks like that, or we render the ChatGPT attributes. Very simple. And if none is provided, we let the user know. So let's take a look at the model. Let me add some separation here because I want to talk about these two lines. This is the line of code that specifically declares a delegated association with the AI config. So let's break this down real quick. I'm going to use this as a scratch pad. AI config has AI config adaptables. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it has a reference to either a ChatGPT config or an OpenRouter config. So let's get rid of that note there. I just wanted to simplify it down to the bare essentials. So this is my list. Ooh, this is wrong. There we go. Remove the bug from the application. So here's my two adaptable types. This feature is hot off the presses, so there might be a couple changes in here. That's okay. We'll fix them live. So a delegated type, you have a name for the association, and then you have the actual concrete types that it's referencing. So in this case, I called it an adaptable. Say that 10 times fast. So AI config has an adaptable, and let's take a look at what those are. We have an OpenRouter config that has various models that it supports, and you'll notice that it has its own way of integrating with the API. And like I said, the ChatGPT config is much more robust, has a lot more features and knobs to turn. Let's take a look at the simpler one. They both include this adaptable module, and notice that the naming is consistent. Delegated type is adaptable, which means you can access it if you have an AI config. You can access it like this, adaptable. Okay, simple enough so far. And in order to share a little bit of logic between all the different adaptable types, I've created this adaptable module, and it is actually nested inside of this class definition right here. Very simple. We know that every adaptable is going to have at least a reference to its AI config. So let's take a look at what this looks like in the controller. It's a pretty standard controller, and we see all the usual things we're used to here. So where does the magic happen? Well, this is a bullet train application, so all of the params are defined in the API. And here we see what we're looking for. This is how you get your adaptable attributes into your AI config. So again, this is still a work in progress, so the user interface is not necessarily the most intuitive. But in here, there's a form. This form inside this page controls the AI config, which when you click this button, it goes to the update method in the controller. So you can change all these different things and click update config, and there you go. So this is what makes that work. There's lots of different ways that you can do this, and this is probably one of the more easy because it does not require any kind of custom JavaScript on my part. This is the bullet train recommended. It's not my favorite approach in terms of user experience, but it does work. And you can see this flow if we add a new type. All right, we'll leave it in the draft state, and we edit it. We don't have an adaptable type, so we render the options right here. So we can choose ChatGPT or OpenRouter config. If you choose ChatGPT, it goes ahead and re-renders the form with these fields, and you'll recognize this same pattern. Case, form object, the form object is the adaptable. And if it's a ChatGPT config, we render those fields, otherwise the other fields. All right, so now you begin to get a picture for how the data flows into the application through the params. And these adaptable attributes, if you've hung out around Rails very much, you might recognize this pattern. Let's go back to our AI config. I highlighted this line just a couple minutes ago. Accepts nested attributes for adaptable. That allows us to do this, adaptable attributes, and pass in the nested attributes for that adaptable. Notice that you have to set the adaptable type directly on the parent model, and that allows it to know what kind of type it actually needs to create before setting these attributes on it. So that makes sense. And there you have it. I'm not going to get into the implementation details of how this actually integrates with the API because I want to keep this short and sweet. But that gives you a basic overview, and if you want to steal this pattern and use it in your application to support multiple ChatGPT style configurations, go ahead and let me know how it went. And I hope you improve on it because this is just the rough version of the integration. I would want to see a lot more dynamic interface and a lot less clicking around, re-clicking update buttons and edit buttons and things like that. But this does work, and it gives you an overview or gives you a feel for how the pattern works without obfuscating it with a bunch of extra JavaScript interactions that can hide the simple mechanics behind the actual functioning of the Rails forms with the backend. So you don't have a bunch of magic in the front end doing things for you. Sometimes it's easier to understand that before leveling up your application and sprinkling in the additional magic, which is actually a Rails Quest principle. It's not just a Rails Quest principle, but it's one that I teach as much as I can, which is progressive enhancement. You get something in that works. You could actually ship this the way it is. It's not ideal, but you can improve upon it along the way. Progressive enhancement is actually built into the DNA of the internet, and if you're not aware of that, you should look it up. Maybe try asking Perplexity. Anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and close this out. I hope you've enjoyed this summary of delegated types. Again, let me know what you thought about it and how you plan to use this feature in the future. And please remember to hit like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or go ahead and follow me over on Twitter. Thanks. Bye.